All right, what is up, everybody? So, today I have Banshee, and I kind of wanted to try something a little different. Now, some feedback that I see, and I think it's pretty justifiable, about Warframe content creators is that, the builds that they show are only viable for people who've been playing the game forever, that are already in the end game, that have such strong mods and arcanes and whatever that they're going to steamroll the game anyways. Now, somebody I really appreciate is Lazar. So one thing Lazar does that I think is really cool is he always makes like a wide range of weapon builds. Now he always focuses on weapons, right? That's kind of his thing. And he kind of starts with like a budget build, adds like more and more expensive and late game mods to it, and then he has like the steel path, like fully kitted out version. So I was thinking, what if we did that for frames? Like, how drastically would that change the performance of different builds? Like, can a build function with a budget version, and what's the difference? So today I wanted to try that. So and I have other things in this loadout, but the two things I'm using is Banshee and I'm using the Aeolac. The reason I picked the Aeolac is because I'm pretty sure that's part of the new supporter pack. And even if it's not, you can get it like, it's like a decent weapon. You can get like, I mean, you get it from doing the Zeraman stuff, which is going to be, as you're progressing through the story. So you should have this weapon like before you get to Steel Path. That was kind of my criteria. I'm using the Taxon for a companion because I didn't want my Hound to be carrying me. So this is like, and I'll show you the builds on these after this mission, or once I hop out of here. But these are like very bare bones builds. Like this is like nothing. There's no item in these builds that costs more than like 10 or 15 plat. And they're all like, relatively easy to farm. So I'm just gonna kind of kill some of these enemies. So this is a Steel Path Earth exterminate mission, and which I'm realizing now that I probably okay. There's at least some enemies left. So and you'll see okay, great. There are some enemies over here. So I just wanted to show like this build, can work on like a normal Steel Path mission, right? Like, oh, hello, Mr. Grenier. Now it's gonna be a little more like definitely slower than probably most Warframe players are used to, because this build doesn't have like any prime mods, doesn't have like crazy arcanes. That Kubro went in the floor somehow. Um, but I just wanted to show like, yeah, it's possible. Oh, this is perfect. Okay, I was waiting for the Acolyte to spawn, so luckily this mission took so long that he decided to show up. Now I don't know if this build is going to be able to handle an Acolyte. To be fair. So we'll have to see. So we're gonna go through this journey together. Okay. Sorry, Kubro. Okay. All right. So this is like my whole point of doing this is like, oh, could it like a newish player like new to Steel Path like do a Steel Path mission with this build with like the cheap version of this build? Okay, I killed the Acolyte, finished the mission. Let's go look at the mods on this stuff. And then I will also show like the more expensive version of this build. Now this has no galvanized mods, nothing. Like this is like very like if you get to Steel Path, you should have all the stuff I'm about to show. So let's get into the arsenal here, and we'll go over the build. So good timing, Misery on the Acolyte showing up there. So okay, now so ignore these because I didn't use these at all. So let me just get rid of these guys. All right, so for my companion, I didn't even have a weapon on my companion. I was using all just base precept mods. Literally, if you don't just have these are like literally one plat. Like these two mods are like one or two platinum on Warframe.market. So like anybody should be able to get this loadout for a Sentinel. for the AOLAC, and like I said, this is in the supporter pack. It's not like that hard to get. Okay, so I did have Amalgam Serration, but if anything, this just did less damage because it has lower damage, just a little more sprint speed. So Primary Merciless is like wicked cheap. Like people have like there's literally thousands of Primary Mercilesses just sitting all over the place. So that is the one thing that I did have on here. But honestly, like you can just buy that, or like you're gonna farm that so fast in Steel Path. No galvanized mods though. So this is just a very straightforward like damage, multi-shot, fire rate and punch through, viral. Critical delay is like a little harder to farm, but once again, this is like it's like 3 plat or something on Warframe.market. 100 munitions, like you either kind of need to farm this or just get this from the market. This is pretty important to make primary weapons scale into Steel Path, so I would definitely get this. Um, Now, as far as Banshee goes, now I didn't take out my Archon shards. I just have a little bit of duration, cast speed, and like a blue shard. But I was shield gating anyway, so this should have had a negligible effect. So yeah, I wasn't gonna pay all that bile to take those out. Sorry. But so here's the kind of like cheap version of the build. So brief respite is like pretty cheap. So I checked on Warframe.market. I think the most expensive of these was like 15 plat when I checked. Now, I do have Molt Augmented and Molt Efficiency, and my reasoning for that was if you have the Aeolac, you've made it to Zeramon, you can just, these are pretty easy to farm from just doing like you can do normal Zeramon bounties to farm these arcanes. So I didn't want to use any arcanes that were like crazy expensive or hard to farm. These arcanes you can just farm from doing bounties. That's not hard. Honestly, like this probably wasn't doing anything. The Molt Efficiency is nice to have a little extra duration, but you honestly don't even really need these. Um, so this is a shield gating build using sonar for damage and eclipse for damage mitigation. So you have redirection, so that increases your base shields. It gives you a 2-second shield invulnerability, or invulnerability when your shields break. Resonance is like key for this build because you just want to cast sonar a couple times, kill the weakest enemies, and then those sonars will spread, and that'll give you more and more damage amplification on the tougher enemies. So, like when I was fighting the Acolyte right there, and instead of shooting the Acolyte, I killed the Kubros by shooting them in their weak spot from sonar. So those sonars would copy over onto the Acolyte, making him easier to kill. Um, Preparation also, like I think this was like 8 plat or something, like pretty cheap. This is such a huge quality of life mod. It's so nice. Um, so yeah, so kind of like a shield gating package with redirection, fast deflection, and adaptation. You could also put rolling guard in here. It's kind of up to you. I think streamline is nice. Flow for the energy, obviously. Like you still get on Banshee Prime, you still get like 530. Normal Banshee, it's going to be a little lower. This should be 130%, but I wasn't going to take my Archon shards out. And then a little bit of range. Banshee has like relatively good range or radius on her abilities, so you don't like really need much. And honestly, like it actually helps Sonic Boom quite a bit, and the CC from Sonic Boom is actually pretty nice for this build, for getting giving you a little bit of time for your shields to regen. And the key to this build is Eclipse. Now, I was very excited about Eclipse, the changes coming to Eclipse, because Eclipse was always in Helminth, right? And it always could give damage reduction. The problem was is it wasn't reliable, and like it literally there was no way to tell if you were going to have the damage buff or the damage mitigation from a light source until you actually went to that spot and checked, because the lighting in the game has changed so much. So that's why they changed this ability to the tap hold. And so the Helminth version, the damage reduction is capped at 75%. So even if let me just add some strength here. So even if I add strength, the damage reduction doesn't go up. So you don't need extra strength if you don't want it. You could add strength for sonar, but it's not necessary. The damage reduction is capped at 75%. Now, you could run Gloom, but Eclipse is from Mirage, which Mirage is way easier to get than Sevagoth. Sevagoth is really hard to farm for new players. And two, Gloom is also just way harder to mod for because you need because Gloom wants high strength, high range, and you kind of end up having to dump your duration or efficiency with Gloom, and it's not sustainable unless you have like a ton of end game mods and stuff like energize and whatever. So I was really excited, and plus I frankly just hate I hate I feel like Gloom is really low quality of life because like it's an energy drain over time ability. You're constantly like if you're not I don't know. I don't personally like that playstyle. I like Eclipse. It's just a buff. You can still have energy regen, stuff like that. So I have found that I was hoping with Eclipse being a more reliable form of damage reduction, and it's really the only way to get damage reduction from Helminth. I really wanted to start testing Eclipse out on some of the more like squishy frames, like Banshee, which Banshee's kit is honestly really good, except she's paper, right? So Sonar is an insane damage multiplier, especially with Resonance because it just like copies itself. If you get a couple Sonars on the same spot on a target, they're just dead. It's like the damage is insane. Silence is an absolutely phenomenal ability. And it's her Helminth. So a lot of people, Silence was kind of meta for a while. I think there's better Helminth options at this point, but Silence is a very strong ability. It turns off a ton of abilities from your enemies, like Eximus units and stuff. Although I'm not 100% sure what the recent Overguard changes, but regardless, it prevents a lot of annoying stuff. And honestly, Sonic Boom, even without the augment, it's still like decent CC, to just like you saw me using it in that mission, just knock enemies down to give you like, some time to let your shields regen and stuff. So Eclipse, kind of the one hole, the gaping hole she needs plugged in her kit is defense. And a lot of people for a long time were using Gloom. Now, on top of like the modding restrictions on Gloom, and it's like it's a channeled ability, so there's a constant energy cost, so it's kind of difficult to work with sometimes. The other thing is Gloom doesn't affect enemies with Overguard, and with like Elite Deep Archimedia and the recent changes to Overguard. Overguard on enemies is a bigger problem than ever, and like CC is just not reliable. It's just not reliable to rely on Gloom for Banshee anymore, at least in my opinion. So that's why I was really excited to try Eclipse because it's a buff on yourself rather than a debuff on enemies that can be avoided with Overguard. So between Eclipse, your natural shield mitigation, and adaptation, you get a pretty nice amount of like, you don't feel like tanky, but like you're tanky enough that you can like kill things. Um, Now this is the base version of the build, so now we're gonna do the do the Lazar, and we're gonna go to the expensive version of this build. Now the expensive version does not have Eclipse on it because you can't. I didn't want to switch my helmet. I didn't want to mess up all my helmet abilities. But just imagine that this version I'm going to show has Eclipse on it. So of course it's going to have a lot more primed mods, way more expensive arcanes. So a lot of it is really similar though. Like I'm still using adaptation. I kind of flip flopped between Streamline and Energy Nexus. I think you can kind of like use either. It's up to you. So primed redirection does get you basically to that 2.5 second shield gate cap. Obviously, prime continuity, more duration, prime flow, more energy. The big one on this though is energize. Obviously gives you so much energy that you can drop Zenuric. Oh, that's the other thing. I was using Zenuric in that mission because a lot of new players pick Zenuric, and you can really easily get the first couple energy things for Zenuric. So I wasn't like trying to use any of this other stuff outside of these two. But since I have Energize, I can switch to Unairu. And so Unairu gives me Prime Sure-Footed for free, and it also lets me Armor and Shield Strip for free. So that Acolyte would have died way faster if I was Unairu, and I could have just popped into Operator, stripped its armor. There we go. So, once you have Energize, switch from Zenuric to Unairu. And then Arcane Aegis is like, this is basically what lets this build survivability scale into like higher levels, because you're a more like consistent shield gating build, and that's why like honestly even just using Sonic Boom, just to get like any amount of shields back to trigger Arcane Aegis is huge. Now imagine that this was Eclipse, like I wouldn't actually use Resonator here. So this is like the Banshee build that I was messing around with. This felt really nice, super super nice. So I have 2 Duration Archon shards that gets me to 185 with Prime Continuity. I have the heal over time one. This is just for Netracels, because there's some Netracell key glyphs that bypass your shields and damage your health. So this kind of just offsets those, so I don't have to constantly be switching into my operator form to heal myself. Casting speed is really, really, really nice on Banshee. Like I'm probably gonna try and replace these with Tau Forged Amber Shards at some point to have even more casting speed. You do kind of hit diminishing returns, but it really helps with the flow of the build, because you want to basically you run up to a group of enemies, you spam sonar a couple times, you start killing things, the buff spreads. Now, I didn't go like crazy on strength because I frankly like you don't really need that much. You don't really need strength on this build because Sonar's base damage multiplier is so high, and you're getting like strength by copying Sonars with resonance. And if I added strength anywhere in this build, I'd have to sacrifice a significant amount of survivability, and I just didn't want to do that. So I was trying to make like a more realistic build that you could take Banshee to higher levels. And yeah, of course Banshee does insane damage. Like, we all know that. And the cool thing is, if you really want to, you can always just, hold this and turn it into the damage buff if you really need it, but you probably don't. Um, so going to weapons. So the weapon I've actually been using a lot with this build, and so this is going to be a much different build than the Aolak you just saw. So I've been using the Comarex. So the Comarex is a really interesting weapon. So I have a decent Riven for this. Now it's pretty cool because it already has Ammo Mutation as a unique trait, and it has a viral explosion. So it already has base viral and Ammo Mutation. Pretty cool. So, you have your standard like Primary Merciless, your Galvanized mods, 100 munitions, crit mods. Now, I really like, so if I didn't have this Riven, I would have a Toxin 6060 here. So the Toxin 6060, that would give you Corrosive. I really like Radiated Reload. So if we look at where's primed, so primed fast hands. So when you max this out, it's 55% for a primed mod. Radiated reload is 60% radiation and 40% reload speed. So when you combine that with primary merciless, that gets you down to 1.8 second reload time from, I think the baseline is 3. So you need reload speed on this weapon, and I found radiated reload is a really nice. It just like gives that little extra quality of life, and it gives you some radiation damage. And a lot of enemies are weak to radiation, especially on the new tile set. So I found that this setup with this build was really nice. Now, why the Comarex? So with resonance, you really want to be hitting enemies in their weak spot, right? So I wanted to use a weapon I could target those, but the nice thing about the Comarex is it has splash damage. So I found this to be like a really nice complement to Banshee's kit. I was using this in like the level 200-ish like Steel Path bounties for the Whispers in the Wall stuff, or for the Kavia bounties. I didn't take this into the Deep Archimedia, but I have used this in Netracells, the Steel Path Kavia bounties, the Steel Path Omnia fissures. So level 200-ish Steel Path stuff, and this has felt amazing. And then, of course, for your companion, I would, of course, switch to my Hound. That's going to make this build a lot better. So yeah, so this is it's obviously going to perform significantly better with the better gear, but I just wanted to show the build can work with kind of more like basic stuff. So I'm gonna switch this build over to like quote unquote the real mods real quick. So which is not like really the big thing here is the arcanes because unfortunately these arcanes are still insanely expensive. So what I would do, if you're a new player, focus on getting whatever arcanes you get that you don't think you want. Make sure that they're not like good arcanes, but whatever arcanes you get, salvage them with the Cavia for Voss 4. Start buying those Eidolon caches to get like Energize, Aegis. Um, I think, Grace and Guardian are still pretty good. Um, so just to close this out, let's take this into, let's see, let's do Oxomoko, or yeah, sure, let's do Oxomoko. Something marginally harder, but still kind of entry level Steel Path. But yeah, so I've really liked this Banshee build. I think Overguard is kind of an issue right now. The prevalence of Overguard really makes CC like much, much, much worse. So you do have to build up your Galvanize mods. It does have a little bit of recoil. So I actually messed around with using like the anti-recoil. But yeah, so obviously this a little easier to kill stuff with this build. All right, I gotta keep my Unairu up. So yeah, this is the kind of better version of this build, and you can see enemies just can't really do anything. They're just dead before they can even really target you. So yep, there's that. So I'm trying to find like some tankier enemy. Like you don't even really need a ton of stacks of sonar to kill stuff. Oh man, come on! I just want like one like heavy gunner or something. Now you do have to aim with this. I know like not a lot of Warframe players, some Warframe players aren't comfortable with that. So, you can just switch to a different weapon if that's the case. Alright, whatever. I can't find a heavy gunner, so I'm just going to give up. But yeah, so that's the build in action with the kind of better version. Obviously, I'm literally taking no damage and I'm just killing everything in one shot, as opposed to when I was using the more beginner version. But I love Banshee. Banshee was actually like Banshee and Zephyr were the two frames that I like really fell in love with when I started playing Warframe. And I think Zephyr got a huge glow up with her like, kind of rework. Banshee's kind of fallen by the wayside, and I'm really glad that this Eclipse change seems to be a perfect fit for Banshee. So honestly, I kind of wish they would just move Sonar to Banshee's 4 and give her a new ability. Get rid of her Quake because it's really bad. And just give her an ability with damage reduction. Like, I think she would, using Eclipse with the damage reduction mode is really convinced me that she's a good frame. That's literally all she needs. She just needs a damage reduction ability. Or maybe make it like, sound themed or whatever. Maybe something like Zephyr where it like deflects projectiles. Like, I don't know, something. But I think that she has a ton of potential. I've really enjoyed using her with Eclipse. So hopefully you'll enjoy her as well. Let me know if you liked the fact that I tried to do a beginner friendly build and a more advanced build. I will try to do that in the future. It was kind of an interesting exercise for me because it made me realize, like, man, a lot of builds completely fall apart, even if you just take off like one arcane or something like that. Turns out, not every frame can run at 45% efficiency if you don't have Arcane Energize. So, yeah. Let me know how it goes. And as always, thank you for watching. See ya.